Now, All Things Real Estate continues on Full Service Radio, 830 WCRN. Once again, here's your hosts, Gary Kelley and Brad Avergon.
Welcome back to All Things Real Estate with Gary Kelley.
And Brad Avergon.
And Brad's with Envision Bank.
And Gary's with RE/MAX.
RE/MAX Executive Realty. You've got to say the franchise.
It's that executive flannel shirt that you're wearing today that I should have recognized.
I am wearing a flannel shirt that says RE/MAX on.
It does.
You know what RE/MAX stands for?
I don't.
Real Estate Maximum. How's that?
I like it.
That's your trivia for the day.
That's my trivia for the day.
So let's talk about buy, sell, and hold strategies in real estate.
You know, Gary, I get that question more often than you'd think. A lot of the people that come to me, most of my business is by referral, and they come to me and they say, Brad, you know, we're thinking about buying. Is it a good time to buy? Is it a good time to sell? Or is it a good time to hold on to real estate? What do we do? Some of the clients that I have, they own, for example, they own condos in Boston. Maybe they bought when they were a couple, and now they're up, you know, they've grown a family, and they're thinking about, well, we want to maybe move out of the city and move into the burbs a little bit, get a house with a yard for their kids and their dog, the whole thing. And so they're saying, should we sell our property? Is it a good time to sell it? You know, or is it a good time to hang on to it? Are we going to see some appreciation?
Geez, Brad, with that setup, I'm waiting to hear your answer.
Flip a coin. No, the answer is it's very dependent on your personal situation. So let me give you an example. Let's just talk about, is it a good time to buy? Is it a good time to buy real estate? Well, yeah, in answer to the question, in general, I think it is a good time to buy. I just saw a forecast today. Interest rates are expected to remain low for the rest of 2020, which is going to drive prices up over time as interest rates stay low. So if that's the case, why not try to get into the market as quickly as you can? That being said, what is your period of time that you're going to be living in that property? I think that's a very, very key thing. If you're the kind of person that either relocates from their job, you know, every 2 or 3 years, sometimes, you know, maybe buying may not be the thing for you. Maybe you should evaluate renting. Just because when you get into the property, you don't know what the market is necessarily going to be like 2 or 3 years in that short term. You don't know what the market's going to be like then. And on top of it, you know, there is a charge. So when you list a home to sell, a typical commission, I would say, was probably 5% on a home to sell.
I'm not talking commission.
Let's just assume for our discussion it's 5%. And so you want to at least be able to make your money back plus that 5%. So the question then comes, are you going to see 5% appreciation in the next, 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, the average, I've seen different numbers, and frankly, I don't know what the truth is, but
Yeah.
I've seen numbers that say that the average time someone's in a house is 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen 8 years, and I've also seen 10 years. Bottom line is, you're talking half a generation at some point.
Right.
And if someone's going to buy a house and they're looking to get in and out quickly, and they're not a flipper,
Right.
sometimes renting's not a bad alternative.
I couldn't agree more. You know, we're coming out of a market where not too long ago you couldn't buy the properties fast enough. You'd buy it, and with a month you could sell it for more than significantly more than you purchased it for. I don't think that we're in that kind of a market anymore. I think we're in a normal market which, tends to have 3% appreciation per year on the property. I think that's a realistic number. So, is it a good time to buy? It's very specific to the individual, and that's part of, I think, we're working with someone like Gary and myself. You got to get into those questions, and we get into those questions and have those kind of open discussions.
The other thing is, if you're buying, buy something that has broad appeal. Okay?
Yeah.
If you find a house that you love, and it's that Harry Potter house, okay, just remember that when you go to sell, you need to find someone that likes a Harry Potter house.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely.
So the specialty houses, the ones with the double yellow lines in front of them, that kind of stuff. You by buying something like that, you limit the potential buying population at the point where you go to sell.
I would agree.
So buy generic would be my suggestion. Buy something that is like everything else out there, because that's going to have the broadest appeal.
That's correct. I would agree with that. I think that having that general, the kind of the piece of property that has kind of an either neutral colors, neutral design, it allows, I think, the buyers to be able to come in and see themselves in there. It has that general appeal. You're going to get more traffic in something as opposed to if you have a log cabin in the middle of a metropolitan area. It's going to be that's going to be a tricky sell. So the next question is it a good time to sell, Gary? So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
See, my sense is it's a good time to sell, provided you've thought through where you're going to move. Okay? If you are selling a 3-bedroom ranch and you're moving up to a 4-bedroom colonial, that's great. That's typical and all that. That's good. So it's a good time to sell in that case. If you're looking to downsize, it's also a good time to look at something like that. I think where people get in trouble is if they are in a home, they want to downsize as an example, and they see that the difference in the value of their home compared to what they're going to be able to buy is so small that they're taken aback and then they freeze. And that's just something that people need to think through. So if you're selling and you haven't identified what your next move is going to be, you need to think that through first, in my opinion. And we're happy, we take people around all the time. It's often something where someone's lived in a house for 20 years and they just don't know what else is out there. We will take them out and show them different types of housing. There are apartments, obviously. There are some marvelous, senior communities over 55, over 62, or all kinds of different age limitations. But sometimes people will go in and say, this is perfect, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And sometimes people will say, I don't want to go there. There are old people living there. Well, we're not going to get into whether there are old people living there or not. That's not something that we're permitted to even think about. But it's something that the people need to understand where they're going to next, and that's, I think, very important.
Well, I think the other aspect, and you and I have talked about this before, is the style of living. Sometimes more is not necessarily better. So if it's a good time to sell, case in point, I downsized from a big colonial where I raised my 3 children and had my father-in-law living with us, and it got to the point where the maintenance of that house became, for just my wife and I, after everybody left, was heavy. It was a lot to do, and it was expensive. And the other thing is that...
Is that because your wife likes to live large?
I plead the Fifth Amendment on that. No, my wife is wonderful. My wife is wonderful.
Okay.
She's the best. So, but in all seriousness, no. Carrying a big home has expenses associated with it. The other part is that people forget about is that homes deteriorate over time. So the roofs deteriorate over time. The siding deteriorates over time. There's a lot of major expenses, heating systems, air conditioning systems, that while you may have a big expanse, you have a lot of square footage, those things are going to need to be replaced, and they can be expensive, which now has you putting good money after, into a property that it's going to, hopefully maintain the same price level. It's hard to sell a house for a lot more money because you replace the heating system in it, right? I mean, that's expected that when you walk into a property, the heating system is going to work. The air conditioning is going to work. That's kind of an expected, and the roof is going to be solid. It's not going to be leaking.
The other thing I've observed is houses are a little bit like cars. If you have a small car, the expenses relatively are smaller. Replacing 4 tires, you might be able to get $100 a tire.
Right.
Whereas if you've got an F-150 truck, you might spend $250 to $300 a tire.
Right.
So the smaller vehicles are more cost effective. Same thing's true with housing. A smaller house, generally speaking, will be more cost effective to run and operate and own than the McMansion.
Right, true. And if you buy a condo, then it's also your quality of time. What's your time worth to you? Do you want to be out mowing that back 40, or do you want somebody else to take care of your lawn and shovel your driveway so you don't throw your back out or something like that? So yeah, definitely things to think about with regard to, is it a good time to sell? And again, it's a personal decision. The other question that I get is it a good time to hold real estate? I mean, we've seen real estate appreciate over time, but, have we hit the peak? Is this the magic number and we're going off the cliff? Usually the response to that is, that I give people is no, we're not going off the cliff. And as I said earlier in the show, I think 3%, and I don't know if you agree with that number, but I think 3% appreciation on a property is pretty normal over the long term.
These days, yeah.
One of the things that I've had is a number of clients that live in the city and they want to move out here and they're saying, do we keep the city property? Do I keep that condo? Or do I keep that multifamily that I built up this equity in? And do I stretch myself to go out there and buy a single family home? A lot of that depends on how you want to spend your time and what your tolerance is. So what I mean by that is when your property becomes an investment property and you become a landlord, you have a whole set of obligations. There's a lot of laws around being a landlord. You need to study them well in advance of making that decision so you understand, because in Massachusetts especially, the laws for the most part are on the side of the tenant, not the landlord. So you need to understand you have obligations on how where you put a security deposit. It's interest-bearing, separate accounts, different things like that. The other thing is, if you don't have a tenant, if you lose a tenant and you're out for you have no tenant for a month or so, can you carry that property? Can you afford to pay your mortgage and that other property's mortgage?
See, generally speaking, I like the idea of multifamilies for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
If you have some vacancy, the rest of the units can carry the property. But you have to decide if you're wired to take that call at 3 in the morning that the hot water went out. And a lot of people aren't. And now what you can do is you can hire a property management company to take care of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great, but that's another expense.
Exactly.
So I want to thank you all for listening in to All Things Real Estate with Gary Kelley.
And Brad Avergon.
I want to thank Ted behind the glass and Keith who's doing the video. And we look forward to chatting with you again next month.
Have a great day.
You've been listening to All Things Real Estate on Full Service Radio, 830 WCRN.